Welcome to Not Just Small Talk podcast with Shanna Forrestall. I wanted to start out a little bit by just telling you why we started the podcast. Basically, I'm very interested in making the world a better place, and I think that we do a lot of talking, and sometimes it doesn't lead to action. So I wanted to set a place where we could talk, but talk with a purpose, talk about solutions, talk about a positive way to move forward. So welcome to the podcast. I hope you'll enjoy it. I have a variety of guests lined up, people that I admire, people that I respect, people that are making positive change in the world. So you'll be hearing from some interesting people. Again, welcome to Not Just Small Talk with Shanna Forrestall. I'm glad you're here, and it's going to be interesting to see who we get to meet and what changes we can make in our world. Thanks for being here. Hi, Shanna Forrestall here again, and I am so excited to introduce my guest for today. Like I said, she started as a client, became a friend, and she's someone I highly respect, admire, and really appreciate the work that she does. Dr. Joanne Royer was a licensed psychotherapist for over 20 years. She practiced psychotherapy, worked with a variety of clients, and then kind of moved away from that into what most people would call life coaching, although I think her work spans a little more than that. But I'll let her explain that for you. But she has a lot of experience, and she has a lot of expertise in the area that we're specifically talking about today. And we talked about how little choices can make big change in life, and I think that she's the perfect person to kick this off and to talk about how simple things like your thoughts, Joanne, right, can change your world, can change your life. So let's start by talking a little bit about you. Tell me a little more about your background, how you got into all this.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, first of all, so thank you. Well, I was always interested. I always seemed to gravitate towards the children growing up that seemed to have complicated lives. And for whatever reason, I was a very good listener and attracted these friends of mine who just, I think, needed a little nurturing. I didn't know it at the time, of course, what I was doing. But then I think from there, and then, of course, my own life experiences, I knew I wanted to work with, at that time, I knew I wanted to work with children who were, just sad and unhappy and didn't know how to find their voice and advocate for themselves. So I went into mental health, and this was in the 80s.
Right.
It's dating me a bit. But it was either social work or marriage and family. And at that time, I took the marriage and family route, so got licensed and spent a few years working doing institutional work. Kids who couldn't, for whatever reason, live out in the community.
Right.
And went back to school, got my PhD, always liked to learn and develop. And so my journey started to increase through a PhD. I still did mental health work, did a lot of supervision with clinicians who were getting licensed. And I think right then I started seeing how there was so much self-doubt that these young adults, now, right, I'm in my, 57, now I look back, these 23, 24, so young and easily broken because of them just doubting the kind of work they were doing. Mental health is not something, it's a very difficult job, and it's a thankless job. It's not as though your clients, especially if we're working with children or, families that are very broken, you're working on helping them to acknowledge their children. So they're not always acknowledging you.
Right.
So I think that just kind of, at a time when we're very vulnerable, we all have an ego. Who doesn't want to hear a thank you or an acknowledgement? So I was seeing broken spirits all around me, but a lot of strength that just was not being tapped into from the therapists, from the children, from the families that I was working with. So, and I had a very different approach than traditional psychotherapy at that time. It was, wow, I need to really help everyone move themselves forward. The past has already happened.
Right.
Stuff's already happened. They've formed their judgments, good, bad, or indifferent. But how can they really discover and tap back into the inner wisdom and the courage and strength that they already have? It's just kind of hibernating.
Right.
So someone had told me at that time, this was now I think late 98, 99, about life coaching. At that point, no one really knew what life coaching was. I think it was very, executive coaching is something that most people were familiar with. So I went, and it really, for a weekend, and it really spoke to me. And so I went through, a pretty rigorous coaching training program. And so really apply, and still stayed in mental health work, and really applied all of that work in my director positions in building teams, building courage and clarity and strength and empowerment with the therapists.
Right.
So that they can then go into the room with their client and see their successes so that they can then help their clients see their successes. It's a tiered effect,
right?
What we bring, what the emotional energy that we bring into the room, what we bring into our lives, it's a cumulative effect. People feel that, and then we attract that back.
Right.
So finally, I decided to step out of mental health agency work, if you will, and launch my private practice. So that's what I've been doing the last couple of years, really focusing on coaching. So I always say that I bring a double-fisted approach to my work, because you can't take the therapist out of it.
Right.
That's just part of it's innate, part of it's, learned. So I have that to bring to the table, but I have the other fist, which is all the coaching principles and philosophies.
And that's what I love about what you do and the way that you approach it. I think you have a slogan that's something like, if you don't need therapy, but you need life coaching or something.
And not everybody needs mental health.
And I love that, because you're like a coach for the average person. You don't have to have, a diagnosis or like a severe problem. You're just an average person who may have untapped potential that you haven't reached. And that's something that you hone in on. You help them to find it and develop it. So let's talk about that. How do you help your clients? Because I know you specifically work with changing thoughts, which is also intriguing to me. I know in my personal life, I've been able to overcome a lot of my past, overcome a lot of fear, and overcome a lot of things by honing in on what am I afraid of, and how do I change the thought that's linked to that, and then pushing myself to step out there and be courageous. So how do you do that with your clients? How do you take a thought that might not be serving them, might not be the best thing, and turn it around to bring about life change?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the fascinating thing is the number one thing that most women, because as you know, I largely work with women, that most women come to the table with, or the coaching call with, is I want clarity, I want confidence, I want courage. And so I tell them, you know what? You already have all that. So there's the great news, for you to know that you already have all that. So my job is to really ask you some, deep, laser-focused questions to start tapping into that. So as far as clarity and confidence, it's really, to me, and I'm not the only one that speaks to this, but it's that inner wisdom. It's that inner voice that sometimes people call it intuition, spirit guide, whatever term you want to use, but it's always talking to us. And I think what happens is, we have turned a deaf ear to it, because we're so, are so used to listening to those other thoughts that we have going on, the more critical ones, the judgmental ones, right?
Boy, we know that voice, don't we?
Yes. Yes.
Anybody else out there ever hear that little voice in your head telling you rude things?
Absolutely. And then it's your job, finally, or part of my work is to really help you decide, do you really want to keep believing that voice? But so you either have someone who's just not able to tap into that voice that's speaking to them, the nurturing, self-compassionate, empowering, or they hear it, But it's like, oh, no, I'm not going to believe it.
They don't trust it.
And what happens is the thoughts that they're most used to, you don't have what it takes. You're not good enough to do that. You don't have the same skills as Susie, across the way. Or look at all these social media posts. There's no way that I can have a life like that, create a life like that, contend with, all of that. So those are really, really the two things. I think that our thoughts are, there's stories that we've told ourselves. And it's not really the job to try and figure out what's the root of why I think that way. Because what happens is it's almost like a telephone tag over time. All right. So I'm just going to use me. At 57, I've had a gazillion amount of years where someone's told me something, someone else has told me another thing. Maybe I've seen this movie that the script that I can relate to, whether it's from a critical place, right? So I'm adding all of these layers of content that my mind is absorbing, and then I'm just creating the story that over time I've continued to think. And so I often use food because, especially for women, whether it's, we're dealing with hormonal issues, medication issues, weight issues, most women can relate to keeping a food journal. Right? So if you write a food journal for about a week, chances are at the end of the week, you've seen you pretty much eat the same things. A baked chicken, a grilled chicken, a roasted chicken.
Right.
It's all chicken. Okay, it is. But that's how I look at our thoughts.
Right.
That we, over time, we usually think the same thoughts.
Wow.
Just a few variations of the theme. But if we tend to be pretty critical about ourselves, we were just talking about them, right? I'm not good enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not skilled enough. I'm too old now to change. What are my friends going to think of me if I decide to go a different, avenue? So I do think that thoughts definitely are this starting point to the results that we end up getting or that we don't get. Because like I said, how we show up in our world, the emotional energy, you can't have a feeling without first having a thought. Now, feelings come up, they rise up, things happen. We see a car accident or, we hear that somebody, is sick or we see somebody that takes a fall. You're immediately going to have a feeling. But the main thing that you have control over is how you're going to think about it and then what you're going to do about it, the action or behavior.
So you're helping, and we can establish that pretty much all of us have all these voices in our head.
Yeah.
We're walking around, and some of those are not very nice.
Still not mentally ill.
Right? And some of them are not very nice because we have that critical voice. Pretty much almost everyone I know has that voice in their head that says ugly things to them. And so you're helping them to hone in on what is that voice actually saying, because it's often repetitive. You're saying there aren't a whole lot of different thoughts. Right. It's not very smart, that critical voice. It doesn't come up with a whole different plan every day. It's the same thing. It knows it works, and so it throws it at you, and you go for it, right? We fall for it.
Well, and here's the thing. Our mind is the biggest muscle in our entire body. It's the strongest muscle in our entire body. And its job is to make sense of what's going on. So if an opportunity presents itself, a guy finally, this nice looking guy that you've been, eyeing finally comes up and approaches you, right? All of a sudden your mind is going and says, hey, let's, go for coffee. Your mind is going to want to make sense of what it's naturally familiar with, which is to throw out some critical thoughts.
And make it hard for you.
And make it hard. Yeah. And so you have a thought, and then I have a feeling, I'm uncomfortable, I'm nervous, I'm scared. And then sometimes the action may be that we create an excuse to not go out with the date.
Or if we do, we go out in the wrong energy, we're insecure.
And then what's the result is, well, he probably doesn't ask us again. Right. And then there's a whole other spin cycle now that happens, right? Oh, look at, you see, you're,
I was right, that voice. Absolutely. And you're like, no.
So your mind is going to want to always you might have every intention. I don't know about you, but come Monday morning, I have great intentions to have a great day. Right? Your mind wants to keep you with what's familiar.
Right.
So it wants to keep you on that track. So I work a lot with my clients to anticipate the negative thoughts, the familiar thoughts that are going to come into play, so that if this thought happens, then this is what I'm going to do. So they anticipate it. They don't get thrown off by it.
Right. And that's important because...
And if you anticipate it and you hear that negative thinking or critical thinking come into play, you don't have to think, oh my gosh, I fell for it again.
Right.
Or I was wrong.
So you help them to anticipate what the voice is going to say and then have a plan of action to do something different than they've done before.
Absolutely. You don't have to make a choice to have that thought derail you. So the first thing that I always do is I have people, so I had mentioned this food journal, right?
Right.
So basically I have people keep a thought journal. I basically have them.
I would need a big book.
I know, but you go to Home Goods or whatever, you get this pretty little journal with this pretty little pen, and basically it's your side buddy.
Right.
For the week. Yeah. And you're just writing down all the thoughts that are coming to you. Because the other thing is, because they're so habitual, I'm not good enough, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not smart enough, I can't do it, whatever. You've been replaying those stories time and time again. Most of the time you're not even aware of them. Right. You just hook, line, sinker right into the feeling, or better yet, next thing you know, you're at CVS looking for the big binge bag of whatever. Right. Because
so people move right into a negative action.
The behavior, right? And they're not always in touch with it. So it's really going back.
So the first step is awareness.
Absolutely.
It's just knowing
of what you're thinking.
What am I thinking?
Of what you're thinking. And then the next step is, to link that up with your thoughts. I mean, your feelings. Right. But the great news is then we have all of these thoughts, and then we get to do some work on whether you choose to want to continue believing. Right. Because it's a choice. You could choose to continue believing a certain thought that's familiar to you or not.
Or do something different.
But a lot of women aren't really aware that they are the ones that actually can control their thoughts.
Wow, and that's a liberating thing. I think you're right. I think the more I realize that I am responsible for my life. Yeah. And I start to understand the responsibility and the power of that. And like you said, things are changeable because I can change them. I can't change the world. Yeah. I can't change what's out there, but I can change what's inside of me, how I'm treating myself, what I'm thinking about myself or my life or my potential. Right. I can change that. And that's what you're teaching women to do, is just change what they think of themselves. And I'd say, ladies, that's huge. And fellas too, right? I mean, we all deal with this.
Oh, I have some men.
I'm sure.
I have some men, absolutely. And unfortunately, men, because I think they don't typically have the avenues to talk about. They don't have the circles. You think that they're sitting in Monday Night Football with a beer and they're talking about,
this makes me feel like this. Right? And then I eat chocolate.
That's not really happening. So even more. Right. So I just want to put out there that yes, I target working with women because I'm a woman, but I also have some men, and I relish the opportunity to work with men because I do think that they're underserved in this category. Right.
So I always like to look at little things we can do today that can have big results later on. So let's talk about that. If we're individuals, let's look even just at ourselves as women. Like if we look at on a daily basis, what are little things you and I can do to impact our own life that somewhere further can have bigger impact? What is something that you would say, here's one thing that you could do today, Shanna, to change not only yourself, but down the road it would have an impact much broader than that?
Well, I don't know if this is going to necessarily answer your question, but let's take the topic of courage. So courage is the ability to step into uncertainty. That's really what courage is. I'm going to use myself as an example. So I'm growing my hair out. I know it's a podcast. People can't see. I'm growing my hair out.
We'll put a picture.
So I have plenty of bad hair days. And you women out there know that if you're right,
it's tough.
With our hair, it sets the tone for the whole thing. So I have a bad hair day. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, look at you, whatever. And you know what I just did? I looked myself in the mirror and I said, so what? Right. And I left the house. Yeah. That small thing. Now that might be nothing if people, I don't know how people are hearing that, but that's huge. I left the house. I was basically saying, so what if you have a bad hair day? You might think you do. Right. No one else out there.
Somebody else might love it.
And by the way, it's none of your business what anybody thinks. How about that?
Wow.
How many times have you heard somebody say, I'm worried about X, Y, and Z think? Really? Like, respect them enough to allow them to think whatever they want to think. Why do you need to buy into what you think? Again, it's an assumption.
Right.
You don't even know.
Right. You're guessing.
So deciding to say, okay, you have a bad hair day. So what? What am I going to choose to make that mean?
Right.
I left the house. I stayed in action, which is the big piece, always staying in action. I left the house. I went into my world, into my day, and went about my business. Didn't think twice about it.
Right. Okay, so
That's
that was a
empowering.
quote
That's
unquote
empowering.
small decision, even though it was a big choice for you, and it took a lot of courage.
Big and small is going to be
it's all relative.
to
But let's look at when we start to make choices like that seem so simple on a daily basis. When we start to make a choice to be kind to ourselves, what are the ramifications on the grand scale? What does it do for our family? What does it do for our community?
Absolutely. Well, it's all about how we started off the interview was what you're going to put out into your world, into your universe, into your environment. Think about it.
Right.
I think that, especially for women, because we are inherent caretakers and caregivers, biologically we are. So we're the last person. I saw that often in mental health, where we'll do anything for our kids, as we should.
Right.
We'll do anything for our kids, but we're going to always be on the back burner.
Right.
And that's why I also have largely worked with women who are approaching 50 and older, because, okay, now kids are at college and, they're transitioning out, what have you. And then now you have this, well, what about me?
Right.
From a, what's my life going to look like? And
A lot of women struggle with purpose at that point.
Right.
Like what do I do with myself?
Yes.
Because I haven't taken care of myself for all these years. I've been looking after everybody else. What do I do with me now?
Right. Well, now you get to actually learn to love yourself, have some self-love, doled onto yourself.
Right.
And that's where it all starts. You can only give as much as you give out, as much as you are giving yourself.
And I think that's the key, because I think if we look at the two voices in our head, the one that's the intuition that comforts us, that encourages us, and then the critical voice that does the opposite, it tries to tear us down and limit our potential, for example, if we make the choice to be kind to ourselves, if we make the choice to listen to the right voice, the kind voice, the supportive voice, if we all did that every day, if we woke up and said, today, I'm going to choose to love myself, I'm going to choose to support myself, I think there's a trickle-down effect. And that's what I mean by maybe a little decision like, okay, I'm going to love myself in spite of my bad hair day.
Right.
Or in spite of, I have an extra 5 pounds happening on the hips right now, or whatever, whatever little petty thing we can start with, right? Yeah. That may seem petty on the surface, but is a big thing. Choosing to love ourselves has to have a trickle-down effect on our family and the way that dynamic plays out, right? And then on our community, and then on our world. If we're going to become a better human, I really think it starts with, I'm having a bad hair day, but so what?
So what?
Right?
Right. What am I? I have the choice now to ask myself, what do I want to make that mean? How much power do I want to give that thought?
Right.
Launch yourself into your day, into your world, and you know what? You get someone that comes up, which just happened to me. I love your hair.
Of course.
Like, what?
What?
But that,
you have bad taste. No.
And again, that's funny. And your mind could go there.
Yeah.
And your mind could go there. Or it could say,
what if your hair does
I'm going to
look
allow
good?
you that thought.
Yeah.
That's that person's thought. Thank you.
How often do we do that?
Oh my God, absolutely.
Women do it all the time. I do it.
This shirt or
what?
But
somebody will say, "Oh, you look beautiful today."
Right.
Oh, I didn't sleep well. Why don't we say thank you?
Or I'm 3 pounds heavier.
Right. Why don't we say thank you?
But you know what? I mean, that's spot on.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's saying thank you. It's acknowledging what's going right in our day. That's another exercise that I use all the time. And Jack Canfield, I didn't make this up, but he talks about, the use of a victory log. That was one of his tools.
Right.
Where you acknowledge yourself for what went right.
Right.
I'm so much a believer in small steps to success and being able to start recognizing that. So on my Facebook page, I have a Wednesday wow and brags to help women to start paying attention to what's going right. Yeah. It could be I grabbed that apple instead of that second piece of cheesecake, right? Or could be anything. Or I went to the gym for the first time this month. I finally went into the gym. That's
Right.
great. Or I bought a pair of gym shoes. These are all things that are preparing you, right? These are all statements or bricks, if you will, of courage. They're all
Right.
bricks of courage.
Right. And I think, again, I always go back to the trickle-down effect, because I think if we're hard on ourselves, we're going to be harder on the world around us. I think we model that for our children and our friends. You know, if we're hard on ourselves and we are critical of ourselves, that plays out. And I think that, you know, children model what they see, not what they hear. You can tell them, well, honey, I think you're cute. But if you're not living in self-love and you're not living in self-acceptance, then how do you expect your child to learn that? If your marriage is critical and everybody's ugly to each other, what do you expect them to do? What you say or what you do? They're going to do what you do. They're going to think that that's normal. And I think even carrying that into the workplace, if you're a manager and you go in and you're extremely critical of yourself or whatever, I think that's going to play out in the way you treat other people around you. And I think even in the grocery store, if you've been kind to yourself that morning and then someone does something to you, I think when we've learned to be kind to ourselves, we look around and we see people a little differently, and we may give them a little more grace as well.
Yeah.
If someone pulls out in front of you, or if someone is a little slow, you know, whatever. I know that some of the things in my life that I've been through, especially the traumatic things in the dark times, when I've learned to be kind to myself and get through them, now I'm a little more aware when I'm out there. I look at somebody else and I try not to make an assumption. I try to give them some grace and think, wow, you know, I've had a day where I didn't feel like doing that. I've had a day where I didn't feel like smiling or saying thank you because I was in just such a dark place. What if they're in that place? What if I could turn around and do something to make that better for them? I really think that being kind to ourselves, changing our personal thoughts one by one on a daily basis, and we know it's a challenge. It's not easy, right? We all have to deal with that voice. But when we do, when we take those steps, we do become what I like to call a better human. And then if we're a better human, then we help create better families and better communities and eventually a better world.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think we walk around and we feel like we don't have a lot of power. And I know I get really frustrated with the state of maybe our government or the state of, you know, certain things in our country right now, or even in our world, what we're doing to our environment, all those things, and I will feel powerless sometimes. But the way for me, and one of the reasons, honestly, that I started this podcast was because I'm tired of feeling powerless, when really I have a lot of power. It may start very small, it may start with very small decisions, and it may be a little bit of ground, but that little bit of ground, if I can take it, I think it will have ramifications, positive ramifications going forward. So my goal right now and every day is to be a better human and to encourage other people to be better humans. If we all start doing those little things, I think we can change our world.
Yeah. Well, you know, it was beautifully said. There's a great exercise to your point that you can easily do. We're all usually taking a task, one quality or a characteristic that we need a little more of, you know, within ourselves, or we need to work a little harder. Okay, mine is definitely patience. But somebody else, it could be tolerance, it could be compassion.
Right.
So at the end of the day, to ask yourself, where could I have, you know, worked a little harder today? So, you know, so for me, my quality is patience. It's something that I'm always trying to get better at.
I think we all have to work on that.
It's a work in progress. We all have some type of work in progress. And then playing back a situation that happened in the course of the day.
Right.
Right? So, you know, maybe you're standing in line at the bank and, you know, it's taking, you know, 20, 30 minutes by the time you get to teller, and then I'm short.
Right.
The poor teller.
Right.
Right? So I'm able to replay that scenario, and then I'm able to, well, how would I have liked to have been?
Yeah.
Right? Touching upon my patience. How would I have liked to have been? Because we're always going to have a do-over.
Right.
Right? Whether it's at Costco or the gas line or back at that bank, we will always have a do-over.
Absolutely.
You
So
know.
we should be kind to ourselves in that moment. Say, maybe I didn't handle that as well as I could, but let me role play in my head and think about how could I handle that different. And I think there's something a lot to be said for preparation. I do that a lot, especially when I'm trying to retrain myself in an area, when I've come across a thought or a pattern and I went, wow, I really don't like that. That doesn't serve me. So I'm going to replace that. But it takes practice. And sometimes it takes, like you said, sitting down and thinking, okay, that didn't work.
Yes.
Let's find another way to try that on another day.
Right.
But that's how we discover new ways of operating, or what might serve us better now, or practicing. Or even I learn a lot from other people. I like to watch people. You know, I get a lot from the friends and people in my life that are older than me, that are, you know, old, like 57. No.
Thank
kidding.
you. Yes,
I'm getting old.
right.
I'm like, no, we're middle-aged, girl. Maybe middle. No, but I love hanging around people who are like in their 70s or 80s, right? And just learning from their wisdom, learning from their life experience. And I may not agree with everything they say or, everything they do, but I think when we take the time to look at other people around us, we can find people who are doing some things well, and say, oh, I like the way they handled that. Or, wow, I really love the way she was patient with that child when they did that. Or, oh, wow, he was really gracious the way he treated his wife in that moment, and we can learn from other people too.
Yeah.
So if you can't think of a way yourself, maybe you can look around and find someone who models what it is that you're trying to do in a way that's new for you.
Or you can do that just with yourself. Chances are, if you go back to when you're, I'm 57, let me go back when I was a teenager.
Right.
What would I say to that 16-year-old Joanne then? Right? Chances are I would, if I would be writing to myself, I would be much more compassionate.
Right.
Much more forgiving, much more understanding, empathic, show her, more self-love. Right. Let her know that, as shy and timid that she was back then.
Right.
That she had a voice. And so you could do that today.
Yeah.
Then ask yourself, why can't you show yourself that to yourself?
Right.
As you are as today.
Yeah. No, I've actually used that a lot. I had a terrible critical inner voice, just was a perfectionist all through high school and college age and just so mean to myself on so many levels. And when I started to try to retrain that, I literally had to say it as if I was saying it to someone else. I'm like, Shanna, stop talking to yourself because you're mean to yourself. If this was Sally and I put Sally on the wall, and what would I say to her? How would I treat her if she was 2 pounds overweight or had a little bit of cellulite or whatever, didn't, perform like she wanted? Yeah. What would you say to her?
Right.
And when I realized that I was never as kind to myself as I was to other people, I was like, well, that's a serious problem.
Right.
Because kindness should start at home. It should start in your own heart, right? So then it helped me a lot to role play in my mind with other people.
Right.
What would I say to that other girl, to that teenage girl or whatever? And that's, I think, it helps us to see the world differently. It helps us to find a new way of operating. And basically, I was able to do that. Another thing for me is just delay. I used to be so hard on myself, and I would tell myself, well, you know what? Let's talk about that tomorrow. And I would stop that critical thought in process. And then sometimes it got to where tomorrow never came. And I never ended up having to be mean to myself because I would just stop it every time. I'm like, nope, tomorrow, nope, tomorrow, nope, tomorrow. And I would just put it off. But I broke the pattern of that mean voice in my head. And now when it comes back, I'm like, who are you? Get out of here. And I deal with it so much faster.
Right.
I'm like, no, you're rude. Get out. You don't belong here.
Yeah.
But it took years of practicing. I literally used to physically had a lot of issues with my body, and I would have to go and that came from, choosing relationships that, did not support healthy self-love. And so to retrain myself, I would literally go look in the mirror and I would say, Shanna, you saw yourself, maybe yesterday and you were okay with yourself. There's no way that you have dropped 10 points in a few hours or in a day. I had to reason with myself. Like, you were fine with your body yesterday. And today you want to go jump off a cliff because you think you're fat and ugly. Like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
There's no way your body could change that fast. So you need to chill and let's wait a few days and see how you feel. And inevitably that would change again. I'd look at myself and I'm like, well, I'm fine.
Yeah.
Right? It's so silly.
No, it's
but
not.
I had to retrain my mind and not let that voice win.
And the thing about retraining your thought is that it needs to be replaced with something you truly believe.
Right.
And so, when we're talking to women, if they truly believe that they're not attractive, it's not as easy to say, well, I'm pretty. We used to hear that. Well, just say,
but we have to believe it.
But if we can find one thing, I may not think that I'm pretty, but I have great eyes. Or
I'm a great mom, or I'm intelligent, or something, right?
Yes.
There's so... Guys, if you're out there listening, I can promise you, there is something absolutely wonderful about you. A whole list of them, okay? And, it's like we just have to look for it sometimes. It's about focus. It's about what are we going to put the focus on? And what are we going to take away if it doesn't serve us?
Yeah.
What are we going to replace it with something that is truth. That's a positive truth.
Yeah.
That will get us towards the life that we want.
Yeah.
And do that for everybody else. Guys, I get so frustrated with people bullying online and all of this stuff. It's like, why? Why are we so mean to each other?
Well, you know what? It's interesting because I just did a video on jealousy and envy. That we are, first of all, we're in a negative world. We're in a negative country. So that is, there's something to be said psychologically about group think, right? The term where you want to be part of the majority, usually.
Right.
It takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of energy to separate out from negativity. So not only your mind, but everyone around you.
Yeah.
But to a bigger point, usually if we are partaking in some type of jealous thought or action out of jealousy towards someone else, it's only messaging what we're feeling inadequate within ourselves about.
Right.
That's the truth.
That is absolutely the truth. And, like I said, for me, I'm all three kinds of empath, like high levels, all three. I'm affected by everything and quote nothing. And so for me to stay balanced, I really have to work on finding the positive and not feeling overwhelmed by the negativity or by, even catastrophic events or trauma. And especially when I do relief work or things like that, I have to really detox after that and just shake it off because I'll get caught up in the negativity. But for me, it's been about pulling myself back to me and saying, okay, I can't control the world, but I can control me. How am I going to treat people? I can control my house. In my house, we are kind. We do not yell. We do not fight. We do not do all these things. In my house, we don't do that. My cat and I have a relationship. My husband and I have a relationship. We have a family in our home. In my car, I don't do that. Nobody does that. There's no yelling. There's no screaming at other people. Like, no. And my little piece of the world, it helps me to be able to control that. And say, in this space, I bring love. In this space, I'm going to bring, forgiveness, peace, patience. And that's not always easy and I'm not always perfect, but I know, like you said, I can always get a reset. If I don't like who I am in a moment, I literally have said to my husband, I'm going to go work on myself and I'm going to be back because I don't like who I'm being right now. I don't like the way I'm behaving. It's coming from a place of insecurity or whatever, negativity, whatever. And I'm going to go fix myself and come back because that's the Shanna I want to be, is the Shanna that is, kind and loving, a good human being. And it takes work, guys. Like it just doesn't happen, unfortunately. I mean, there may be a few of you that wake up perfect every day, but Lord have mercy, you didn't on this side of the mic. But Joanne, thank you so much for coming to talk to me today. Absolutely. I thought you were the perfect person to kick this off because you really embody the power of thought change and how one thought, just honing in on one thought and replacing it with something positive can literally change someone's life. Let's tell people how to find you. What's the best way to find you? Your website.
So my website is www. Do we still always have to say that? www. Joanne Royer, ROYER,
And I'll put it on the post. She's got some great resources on there.
I do. I also have a private Facebook page called Female and 50 Without the Self-Doubt.
Love it.
So that's something that it's free, of course. So you can join that. I put up some videos and Monday mindset posts.
She writes some really great blogs, guys, on inspirational topics. They go out on Mondays, right? You can get on her mail list. Monday Morning Minute. If you need something to fire you up for the week, you need something positive to focus on. She's always talking about something practical. That is a good thing to focus on for the week.
Yes. And then lastly, starting the end of May and June, I'm doing 2 groups for actually, this might surprise you, introverted women who are more inwardly inclined, as we like to say, 25 to 38 age.
Awesome.
So I'm doing an online, it's a private Facebook group. There's going to be some journaling because there's most introverts like to reflect and are very introspective, like to write, so journaling. And then we're going to meet once a week
that's
online in group, and then also in my Arcadia office once a week.
Awesome.
So I've got
She has a lot of resources, guys. So if you're a woman or if you even know a young adult or anyone that needs some coaching or some, thought readjustment, She's really good at that, and as you've heard, she knows a lot about what she's talking about, and it's a great gift that she gives to the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joanne.
Appreciate it.
And thanks, everybody. Like, I hope that you learned something like I did today, and that in some way we've encouraged you to, work on being a better human. It starts with us. It starts one by one, person by person, thought by thought. And hopefully today you found a negative thought that you can replace with a positive one. And we'll be back later to talk to somebody else. This is Shanna Forrestall with Be a Better Human. Thanks for listening, guys.